We are live. Good afternoon. This is Amuse News. I'm your host, RJ, back in Philly. I have a really fun guest today, one of HRN's original podcasters, Darin Bresnitz, who's going to talk about his show, Snacky Tunes. Just celebrated his 600th episode. So congrats, Darin. Looking forward to talking to you. As you all know, I want to just let you know about a couple things going on that I'm following, and then we'll do a quick interview. So I wanted to start. I was just in New York, and I got the chance to eat at two amazing restaurants over the past couple of days. The first is I went to a place called Crew in Brooklyn, and it was a totally awesome Thai spot. Really new kind of take on Thai food for me. We had a little bit of everything, but the crispy noodles, which were rice noodles, egg, prawn, chicken, pork, and some mandarin zest, really good. And there was a wagyu hamburger steak with green curry sauce, really good. It's a really, really good, great spot if you find yourself in Brooklyn. Check it out. And then this morning, I stumbled upon a place called One Bite Omakase, and it was amazing. The chef was extremely nice and explained every bite to me, all of which were awesome. I posted some pictures on Instagram, but if you're on the Upper West Side and looking for some really good and really reasonable priced sushi, you should check out One Bite Omakase. I'll put the link to all this stuff in the show notes. Podcast episode that I wanted to mention, Decoder Ring, which I listen to every week. They have a new food related episode today, how the jalapeno lost its heat. They talk with a Dallas-based food writer who fell in love with Mexican cuisine, and then recently started to notice that the jalapenos he'd buy in the grocery store were less and less spicy. So he called some experts, some chili pepper genetics experts, and Dr. Stephanie Walker, who he talked to, explained that the food industry has been basically breeding milder and milder jalapenos for decades. So if you've noticed that your jalapenos are less spicy, that's it's actually happening. So it's unfortunate, but I think you can probably still get spicy jalapenos somewhere. But it's a good listen. What a great podcast. One of our interns, Addison Austin Liu, just put together a piece for us on blue cheese. It was a fun read, and thanks to her for doing that. She talks about kind of like the origin stories, true and false, and the mold, and how that happens, and goes through a bunch of different varieties of blue cheese that are out there. And thanks to our friends at Wisconsin Cheese, who help support what we do and also help support the cheese industry in the U.S. There was a bunch of stories today about the Panera dropping this thing called Charged Lemonade, which I've never had, but if you've had it, let me know. It apparently is phasing out Charged Lemonade. It's a caffeinated drink that was at the center of 3 wrongful death lawsuits filed against the chain. I guess there's the Charged Lemonade contains 155 to 302 milligrams of caffeine, depending on the size and flavor. And the FDA says that 400 milligrams of caffeine a day is an amount not generally associated with dangerous negative effects, meaning that one Charged Lemonade comes close to the recommended daily limit, but apparently there were people who were drinking a lot of it. And anyway, there's a link in the show notes to this article. Some kind of complications around whether this beverage was really related to some of these unfortunate occurrences, but either way, they're dropping it, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. Lastly, I want to tell you this company, Meaty Foods. I've been talking a lot about plant-based meats and alternative meats. They closed $100 million C round, and according to the press release, they're going to expand into a bunch of new stores, and they opened what they call a mega ranch in Colorado last year, which apparently has a facility that has a target of producing 45 million pounds of mushroom-based meat. So this is a mushroom-based meat company. They're going to be putting their products into Kroger stores and a bunch of others. I don't think I've ever had mushroom-based meat, but 100 million round is pretty serious for a company like this. So definitely continues to grow in that industry. And as always, if you have stuff you think I should be talking about, or you have news stories you want to share, or if you want to just share what you're up to, hit us up on social media. Okay, I'm going to bring in our guest now, Darin. Welcome, Darin. How you doing?
I'm good, man. It's great to be sitting down with you. I had mushroom beef jerky once.
Okay.
Once.
How was it?
Once. You know?
That explains it. That's all you have to say about that.
I just and obviously I eat meat and believe in balance and ethical raising of animals. So, but I've never really looked for meat alternatives when I didn't want to eat meat. Living in LA, um, just give me vegetables. Just give me
Yeah.
something. Give me grains. Give me something that isn't like more processed than arguably farm fresh animal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever I feel the same way. Like vegetables are great, you know, but
Yeah.
like so is meat. I feel like you could put the two, like you have a little bit of each and you're good, you know?
Yeah, and also those who are looking for still hot jalapenos in LA, Northgate Market has all your needs for chilies there and beyond.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I figured that you
Yeah,
had thoughts on that.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what do you think about the kind of alternative meat thing? I mean, do you think it's actually gonna eventually take its place as like a real stand-in for meat, or do you think it's just gonna continue to like sort of slowly grow?
Um, I think there's a lot of issues with it, and I just think the problem is that it doesn't really answer any of the issues with what is people looking for alternative meat other than that issue is that if you don't want ground beef, you want ground that, but highly processed, um, you know, uh, not natural.
Yeah.
Everything that is GMO has been GMO to it. And unfortunately, the flavor is just still not there after so many rounds. And I've done some work and I've seen some pieces on 3D lab printed steaks and things like that. But
Mhm.
again, I just it's just not for me. Like I just
Yeah.
give me a hen of the woods mushroom. Give me
Yeah.
something, that's big and bulky. Give me some roasted beets.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. Well, like $100 million raise, you know, for one of I don't know many companies out there like doing these sorts of raises. Like someone sees something there, but I don't. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the balance, like you said it earlier, balance is what it's all about. You know.
I mean, big agriculture and farming in America is so complicated, and I'm not even going to pretend to be an expert
I mean,
on it.
neither.
Um, but I think maybe the fix lies in there instead of maybe a new company. I just don't know what that is. I don't know what the answer is. I guess I think this was a new exciting product, and then I think a lot of people have had it, and the people who want it, but I think it's the desire for it is less, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I see too. I guess anyone listening or watching, if you wanna take the opposite view and come on and talk to me about alternative plant based meat products, let me know. Darren, you just you just celebrated 600 episodes of Snacky Tunes,
Mhm.
and now you're on to 601 because you weren't going to just stop at 600 and then move on to a new
No.
project.
No, no, no. I mean, Heritage Radio and Snacky Tunes are part of who I am. So, I look forward to it every week when I get to sit down with someone new and talk about what's going on in the world. And to be honest, and I said this in the Substack that I put out this week, um, a lot of the times my conversation with someone for Snacky Tunes is the only time we'll ever talk or the longest time we'll ever talk. So to have that opportunity to sit down with someone for 30 to 40 minutes and have a chat, I don't take for granted,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I appreciated your reflection on that. Okay, so music, the combination of kind of music and food, I think it's really important and interesting. And I don't know, I don't know where you started with the show in terms of what you were trying to accomplish versus what it evolved into. But what was your initial goal or thought that what you might do with a show like this?
Well, I got to go all the way back to even before the beginning. I had developed this cooking show called Dinner with the Band for IFC, and we were doing that with my brother Greg, who is one of the co-founders of Snacky Tunes and the co-host, co-producer originally. And we had gone to Patrick Martin because we knew Brandon Hoy, who is the founder of Roberta's, and we heard they were launching a radio station, and Greg had been doing radio, and he went to him. He's like, I'd like to do a music show. And they said, well, there has to be a food component. And I was like, well, we're already doing a food and music TV show.
Hmm.
So this should be pretty easy. And then I just think that we just didn't really force it. Because a lot of the times we would ask chefs about music and they would have a basic answer, and the bands would sometimes be able to talk about it on the road. And when it came up, it came up. But I think it's just evolved, when I think about like the last few years, because I'm sort of the last one standing as the host. It's more of their life story, more of a reflection. It's if I can get to a point where I say, like, what do you listen to when you're gardening or cooking, or where do you or on the road? But I care much more about where they come from, who they are, where they're going, why. The why is really more important than anything else these days.
Yeah. What were the early days like, and what year did you start?
Started in 2009.
Okay. So this is like
Drop
really before podcasts were actually.
They weren't. I mean, I don't think they were called podcasts. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they were. It was
It was
digital
just.
radio that was
Yeah.
archived.
Yeah.
And to be honest, y the original shows are up. They're in Heritage, but you have to really know how to search for them. Um, we've just maxed out on some of the aggregates and, the iTunes and Spotify for some of the older episodes. But it was great. It felt just exciting to, I mean, we come from a DIY background. I came
Yeah.
from shows, came from the idea of just, you want to make something, go make it.
Hmm.
Please Kill Me was instrumental into the way I approach making art and creating content. Um and we just went there every Monday afternoon, and we just booked guests, and it was great. And it took a little time to get up and running. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to be. We were still DJing at that time, so it was a lot of DJs, and we were DJing, and then we just got rid of that.
Yeah. 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 That's wild. I mean, so I started a music podcast in 2013. That's still going and hundreds of episodes and all that. But when I started, I don't think I imagined that it would go much longer than like, I don't know, 6 months, 12. Like I definitely wasn't like, I'm going to be doing this in 10 years. Did you have a vision for like, you know, still doing this 15 years later almost?
I mean, there was never an end date. you
Yeah.
know um I believe in the network believed in us. People kept coming on, and no one's told us to stop.
Yeah.
So I've never thought about this ever ending.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that my goals for what I want to get out of the show, what I want to be the show, align with a lot of the ethos of the network and what the network is. But I mean, I could argue that I've never had more interest in people being booked on the show than I do today. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough shows to book everyone that wants to come on. I mean, I do 40 interviews a year,
Yeah.
to account for the breaks that we have. I think even this year I went through our spring break because I needed to get through some backlog. Um, but it's great. Listen, people want to talk to me. As long
Yeah.
as they want to talk to me, I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
Uh, and I really love it. The bands have gotten trickier. We had a really great setup with, obviously, with the studio. And then when I was in LA, we were working with Danger Bird Record Studio, where we would record 2 bands a month.
Hmm.
Um, and then post pandemic, it just got really complicated. So now we do it. It's more sits together. They'll send us live songs and record it. But I still, I try and get a band a month. But it's always a new food guest.
And what have you found? What have you learned like as an interviewer? Because you do this for long enough, you probably have things you've learned and maybe things you didn't know before that are like more part of what you do now.
I think people underestimate how often someone asks another person how they're doing in a genuine fashion. Um, how are they doing? What's your story? Where you come from? And genuinely want to hear about it.
Hmm.
And everything is like now. Like, this is
Hmm.
what I'm doing now. I'm posting this now. This is what I'm doing in the future. And I'm really interested to see how it all connects. And I think that, giving people the opportunity to go back as far as we can makes a lot of sense for what they're doing now. So I've seen that, and I've been through the rise of food culture,
Hmm.
starting working in 2001. Food media and food culture is in a decidedly different spot right now, and I think people have ideas of where they want it to go, and maybe it's not there yet. And food's never been more popular, but people aren't watching as much food TV and or listening to as much food podcasts, but people want to cook and want to eat out. So it's just it's at a crossroads in many ways. That's interesting to be part of the conversation. But I think you also see a lot of people who are still in it and still doing restaurants really want to be here.
What
Yeah.
What do you think are the things that have changed the most?
The money, I think from starting in 2009, which was post. I mean, look, that was a post financial crash era as well, but really 2010, 11, when things started swinging back to, let's say, pre-pandemic, but even up to the pandemic, the cracks were really starting to show. Rent wasn't expensive, inflation wasn't expensive, labor wasn't as expensive. There was a little bit more. Fine dining was more in vogue. There was just all these different things, and now I appreciate it because I think before everything sort of washed out in 2020, people were very judgy about what they called a restaurant. They're like, "Oh, well, you're only open Monday through Friday," or
Hmm.
like, "You don't do lunch," or you do breakfast and lunch, you don't do dinner. And now I think, at least from people who really want to see the industry succeed, are you serving food and supporting the community and it's a business? Fantastic. Whatever shape that needs to take for you, get after it.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. What was the scene like back in the early days of Roberta's in
Oh my God.
your mind? Because I've heard about this from a lot of people, and I just feel like keeping that spirit alive and talking about it is important for the organization. But I heard that it was pretty wild, and it sounded like really fun and like lots of people coming and going at all times. That's kind of the stories I've heard.
I mean, it was wild. And I had gotten to Williamsburg 2003 for a bit, and then I left to go to Austin and finish up school in Boston and came back in 2005. And Williamsburg was still pretty on the edge, a lot of empty lots, no
Hmm.
corporation, no things like that. But the wildness had sort of come and gone. That was like the late 90s. And so when we were DJing at the Royal Oak and Brandon and a bunch of the other early Roberta's guys were bartending, and he said that he was going to go up a pizza shop in Bushwick, everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" There was like the syrup room and other warehouses, but no one went out there. And so when it opened and Heritage and started, you know, you could feel something shifting, but no one had any idea what that ripple would be.
Hmm.
Um, but it was just so exciting. I mean, it was just, to have keys to the clubhouse, to be able to go there, to be able to go on air, to be able to see things changing and to put it down on the record and share those stories who weren't within Brooklyn, was pretty exciting. And the parties at Roberta's were as wild and legendary as they said, and Tiki Disco on Sundays was all time. I just everything you've heard is probably true.
That's awesome. So how did you want to integrate music into this show from the beginning? I mean, it sounds like because you had already been you were DJing and you were a music fan. Did you intend to like make it into a like where the content was integrated?
No, so when we started, we were DJing, and we've been DJing for a while. We were just trying to find a way to like have to DJ less but still be out there. And then Greg just saw this band Freelance Whales busking in the subway and invited them into the shipping container. It was a 5-piece band, and we cleared out the furniture. and that was the first band we ever recorded. And it turns out the acoustics were great. And we were booking dinner with the band, and so we were out at shows a lot, and we were just really in like the live music scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just started doing bands. And at that time, we were playing pre-recorded songs as our break off of Spotify, and kept getting our hands slapped because they weren't cleared. And then eventually we were able to work up enough bands from the archives where we didn't need to play songs, pre-recorded songs anymore. I think maybe the last thing, I think maybe a new Drake album had come out, and we played, something off the new album, and they're like, it's one thing for you to play like indie band that no one ever heard of. It's another thing for you to play
Mm-hmm.
Drake. And then it just, now it's just all live songs
Yeah,
from the archives. We have hundreds of bands that we can pull from. And so it's all original content start to finish, which is great.
that's awesome. What's the biggest disaster that you've had while recording?
Okay. There is a band that will go unnamed. And if you really do your research, you can, well, I don't know if the episode's even out. Anyway, a band will go unnamed. We were super excited to have them on. And the way that it used to work is that bands would come in before we started recording, and we would go out live. Now everything's pre-recorded. And they set up all their gear, and then the band would go hang out in the like in the patio at Roberta's. We do the
Mm-hmm.
food, gas, and then the band would come in. And so the whole show, we're talking about this band. They're coming in. They're so excited. We can't wait. And then with 5 minutes left to go in the food interview, one of the band members comes in, grabs their van keys, and just leaves. And we finish the food interview. We toss to a song, and we go out. Band is gone. And it turns out some of them are strung out and got into fights with the staff and destroyed a bathroom, and were kindly asked to leave. And so we came back and said, due to unforeseen circumstances, Bleep will not be playing, and we'll see you next week. And then we left, and they left the gear there for like a day or two, and we had to
Wow.
finally track them down to get it out. So yeah. But
Wow.
honestly, that's, I can count the bad stuff on literally one hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's about as bad as it got.
I have some stories out, like, I think when you record with people you don't know, that to me is when, like, people who you're like, a publicist reaches out and is like, "Hey, this person has a new book. They want to come on your podcast," and they start talking, and you're like, "Oh shit, this is not what I was expecting." That's happened to me a few times.
To be honest, I've gotten to be a pretty good judge. I have a really great, shout out to all the publicists who keep Snacky tunes in their mind. And then I'll do some cold reach out. But I have a general idea of the guests that I'm booking, and I can get it, if they've done press before, get a sense. Some of the early bands were just really, we book we call them, like baby bands. Just haven't done enough to really talk about for a 20-minute interview sometimes. And if they don't really want to share anything outside of the band stuff, then can't really talk about a lot of things.
Yeah. What's your biggest, like, what are you most proud of in terms of the past, I don't know, 15 years? Or are there standout episodes that you still like that you contribute to?
There are. I mean, I wrote about a few of them in the last Substack. Mike Thielen, Nina Compton, Helen Rosner, and Royce Burke. Right, like the week we shut down on a Sunday for COVID, and we had them on like Tuesday, Wednesday. That type of stuff. I just think I think it's the whole. I think it's the whole of the work and the archive that we've built. And I hope that people discover the show and just see that, the show's been there through a lot of it and seen the ups and downs and given a voice to it. It started the show because a lot of times when I work on TV production or things like that, it's like one talent, and it used to be for months at a time. Now it's a little different because of social media and short form. And not everyone's story is going to get on TV, or not every story is going to get their own radio show. So to be
Yeah.
able to create a space where people tell their story, to learn how to take a step back, because the early days, and look, people can write in and say that they see it differently, but I felt like the early days, people were sharing their stories, and I was very quick to be like, well, I also have done this. And now, over the years, I've really done my best to step back as much as possible and just act as a guide for people to share their story. And so, uh, putting people's stories on the record.
Yeah.
It'd be great if people down the road, I don't know, who knows, if they ever need a resource or to hear something about a certain chef or get some insights, or they're doing a project, that they could go to Snacky Tunes and listen to the chat and be like, okay, I walked away with something where I didn't hear anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. I like the way you describe the evolution as a host too. You get to the point where you're really just, you're the guide for them to tell their stories.
Yeah. And listen, Heritage has never told us who to book, has never told us if we do book someone who's in cycle, okay, you got to ask these questions so that and that we got to SEO this episode. So if people are searching for this person, we'll pop up and talk about it. And if anything, I usually go the opposite way. If someone's in cycle for something, I try and read or listen to their other interviews and ask the questions that aren't asked. Because
Yeah.
if I can read their answer or see the question in 2 or 3 other interviews, there's no point in being the fourth to get them to say the same 2 or 3 lines.
Yeah. 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 So what keeps you going? You kind of touched on this, but what keeps this going? This is a long-term project.
I mean, I don't really know what my life would be without Snacky Tunes, at least creatively. Um, Look, it's no secret that the media industry is in a tumultuous time right now.
Yeah.
And uh, I, like many other people in my field, have been affected in it. I've had some good months, I've had some awful months. But Snacky Tunes and the community has been there for me, and I feel like I've been able to be there for the community when they've had some tough times. Um, I feel lucky to do it. I don't know what else to say. It's just, how rare is it? How rare is it to be able to sit down and chat with strangers and
Yeah.
to let them just talk, without guidance, without anything? I still don't really believe it when I get to
Yeah.
do it sometimes. So that's why I do it. It's just it's a really amazing thing, and I think I've gotten good at being like finding the 40 or 50 people I talk to a year who really want to have the same conversation I have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool, man. Well, congrats again. And,
Thank you.
thanks for being part of what we're doing here. Big part of it. So thanks and congratulations again.
Oh, thanks. Here's to 15 more years and 600 more episodes, right?
Yeah, let's
What,
let's do it.
601's on Sunday, so 599 to go, right?
5.99 to go. Thanks, Darin, and thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm actually talking to Jimmy Carbone tomorrow. So
Jimmy, my
we got
guy.
back to
He's
back OGs.
he's been there. He's been there almost as long as I have.
Yeah. Yeah. So people who are watching, listening, stay tuned. But tomorrow we'll have another conversation. It'll be different, but it'll be just as interesting. And thanks again, Darin.
Of course, thank you.